Now, voters across the United States have heard from President Joe Biden, who was the first keynote speaker at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
The convention runs until Thursday, when Vice President Kamala Harris will officially accept the Democratic Party's nomination as its presidential candidate for November's election.
Well, during a lengthy farewell speech, President Biden defended his legacy and hailed Ms. Harris.
Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, President and Vice President of the United States?
We are joined now live by the US political strategist, Calvin Dark. Morning to you. Thank you so much for staying up to talk to us. We're getting like lines from the speech in all the time. Of course, it's only, the convention is still very much going on in the United States. Really interested by this quote that we've just had from the president, talking about, for 50 years, I gave my heart and soul to our nation. I was too young to be in the Senate, talking about when he joined, and too old to stay as president. Does that just about sum it up?
Well, good morning. Yes, I think it does. I think it sums up not only how Biden sees the situation, but how the Democratic Party sees this kind of unprecedented moment where we have a current president who is not running for re-election, trying to advocate for his vice president who's in the room. So this is something that we haven't seen here in the United States.
It was somewhat of a risk for him to make this speech as well, given that performance at the debate that led to so many of the recent problems and then prompted him to step down from standing again. How would you assess his performance in this speech?
Well, I think that two things were made abundantly clear. The first is that the decision to withdraw from the race was a very painful one and a difficult one for Biden and his family. And the second one was, it was the right decision. I don't think anybody doubts that after we have seen over these last 3 weeks, the enthusiasm and the hope that the Democratic Party has now that they have an actual chance of winning, that Biden made the right decision. Now, I also think that one of the things I was looking more for was making the case for Kamala Harris. But I think this was more Biden making his case for his legacy and then tacking on at the end, if you want to see it continue, there's your person in Kamala Harris. So I think that given the unprecedented nature, Biden did as well as could be expected, trying to balance all of those different dynamics.
And I suppose that is what the question now is for the next couple of days, isn't it? How do they now shift towards the vice president and her plan over the next several months? This is the real emphasis now, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think that's why you saw some of what we call the older part of the Democratic Party. And I think that was a strength. Part of what we saw tonight was honoring Jesse Jackson, who ran for president as first African-American running for president in the 80s. And it shows how the Democratic Party, in contrast with the Republican Party, embraces all the generations that make up the current party of today. But I guarantee you that starting tomorrow, it will be about Kamala Harris. And it will be how she is going to run with the positive things from the Biden-Harris administration, but set herself out a little bit differently as to how she would be a different leader going forward. And now that Biden is off the stage, she can do that a little bit more freely.
Yeah, and talking about those differences, it's interesting, isn't it? Until President Biden had pulled out of standing again, it was a choice between two relatively elderly men, white men who were standing to be leader of the United States. Now that choice is pretty stark, isn't it? And I wonder whether America, though, is ready to elect its first female president.
Well, there are going to be obstacles for first female president, first female president of color, African-American. But you know what? There is no bigger motivator for the Democratic Party to do something unprecedented than former President Donald Trump. And I think that because he is the alternative, that's going to make the decision for a lot of the undecided or what we call swing voters here in the United States. I also think that it's clear when we think about what the polls were saying before Biden dropped out, that people wanted something other than the sequel to 2020. And to give Nikki Haley a bit of credit, that she was in the primary on the Republican side, she said the first party to get rid of its 80-year-old candidate has a good chance of winning. And I think what she said is proving to be true.
So how now do the team behind Kamala Harris bring the Biden support with her, but also make her appear separate and new and different?
I actually think their biggest challenge is introducing her. Because frankly, I think even those who may have wanted Biden to stay in or are still nostalgic for Biden, they're going to be for Kamala Harris. And I think that they're going to, one of Biden's lines was, I'm going to be the biggest volunteer for the Harris Walls campaign. And I think that was genuine. But what I think their big challenge is, most Americans know her name, but they don't know about her. And right now, because of this shortened election campaign time, Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to define her as the radical San Francisco liberal. She is trying to define herself as the former senator, attorney general of California, and district attorney. And so their challenge is going to be not just the people know her name, but know who she is, and to do that in 4 days.
Really good to talk to you, Calvin. Thank you. We will talk again before that election, of course, in November. But Calvin Dark, political strategist, thank you for being with us.